Welcome back to the show, the podcast where founders and leaders in the SaaS and tech space get a real platform to unpack what they're building, why they're building it, and what the road actually looks like behind the scenes. Today's episode is brought to you by Hera Digital, helping B2B founders build their sales engine the business actually needs to grow. Head to heradigital.com.au to learn more. My guest today has done 3 acquisitions, spent years running the technical side of an MSP, and now fully stepping into the CEO role at CyberStreams. This year, his focus is clear: build the revenue side of the business intentionally and stop leaving growth to chance. Mat Kordell, welcome to the show.
Hello.
So, Matt, heading back a few steps and diving into the journey before CyberStreams, you went from being deep in the technical side of the business to stepping up as CEO. And you've described it as growing into a new skin. What actually forced that shift, and what's been the hardest part of making it stick?
What forced that shift and what's been the hardest part of making it stick? Well, I mean, so I've had a business partner for about 10 years and, he is approaching retirement age. And so he's, fading into the background, and we're actually figuring out how to land that plane, as it were, to officially separate in the meantime. So I'm working on buying him out, and he was sitting in the CEO seat for the duration of our business. So just upon him taking that step back, it's been on me to step up and fill that spot.
And it is almost like growing into a new skin, because I think from our first conversation, you said, look, I'm happy being on the technical side. So it would be very different, no doubt, but you would have had the experience being shoulder to shoulder with him for over a decade, right? So I don't think it's got much of a shift. What that looks like with new energy, new focus, obviously that's sort of the goal for 26 and beyond, from what I can understand. But you've done 3 acquisitions, so let's dive into a bit of that. Built a business with a long-term partner, and now you're taking the reins solo as he steps back. A lot of founders hit that moment and realize the business they built together needs to be rebuilt around the separation part. Did you have that realization, and sort of what changed?
The business needs to be rebuilt around the separation part. I mean, for me, I'm looking at it, there's kind of 2 components. So we've had a kind of a bumpy ride, or maybe I should say lumpy, not bumpy. Lumpy as in, we'd go to complete an acquisition, and that would take all of our focus and attention away from sales and marketing. And so on the other side of the acquisition, our pipeline would be less, our ability to close would be lower. And then we'd go and build that back up. And just about the time that we get it rocking and rolling, we're doing another acquisition. And that's because we relied on founder-led sales the whole time. So where we're at today is that we're going to very intentionally, by the end of this year, make the move to actually have an independent sales function, sales staff who can continue to chase the leads that we're able to bring in the door, without even if we're doing an acquisition.
And what does that really look like within the MSP space, which would be really interesting to watch CyberStreams and how you approach that market, it being such a volatile market. But you really made a sharp observation that MSPs fall into clients by accident, or it's a situation where they're looking to move. It's very hard to sort of like proactively try and get new customers, I think, from your experience. But you do eventually hit a plateau. They never actually build the revenue side intentionally. And why do you think that is? And what does it cost long term if there is no system in place?
I think that a lot of folks get into various businesses. I think that businesses are commonly started by folks with a sales background, right? They realize that they can drive the revenue, so they have that sales background. They find somebody who can do the technical work of the business, and they put them in place. And so from day one, they're a sales focused organization. I think it's a little harder. It's not the natural proclivity, because salespeople know they need operators. They know they need operations, right? Operations doesn't know they need salespeople. So when you're that nerd making that transition, going, "Oh, I can do this myself," and you walk into it not through having to scrape and scratch and claw and make your way from zero to something. You actually, as we did, wire your way into it. You never learn that that's what you need. And everybody's talking about founder-led sales until you're so many million. And so the kind of the industry best practice, the industry speak is, you just stay in that seat. And that may be fine advice. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad advice. I just think it's, for an organization who wants to be able to predictably continually grow and who has a founder who has aspirations above and beyond just, a lifestyle business, I think you really do have to focus on building out sales and marketing as a primary staple. Not only that, but in the M&A space these days, for the last decade, if you wanted to build enterprise value, all you needed is EBITDA. And these days, you need EBITDA and you need organic growth. If you don't have organic growth, they don't care. You want the multiples, you have to have organic growth. And it's not like we're necessarily going for an exit right now. That's not where my head's at. But someday there will be an exit. And PE probably finds it really valuable for a reason. So maybe the thing I could learn from them is that it is valuable and we should put some focus and attention there.
Especially in the MSP space, there is not a lot of attention between the sales and marketing front because it's such a hard thing to market in the first place, I would say, from the outside sort of looking in. So it's not a common practice. But it's funny you mentioned that, to be a thriving business in 26 and beyond, you not only have to deliver exceptionally well, you not only have to record videos, record podcasts, you have to be super visible. You almost have to wear several hats on top of what you currently already do within the business, right? So, entrepreneurship is not for the weak and it's not for the weak fainted heart, but it does build resilience. So I'm appreciative of that. But also, you never know who you're going to bump into doing these podcasts and being more visible. And I think as businesses like MSPs and M&As move more towards being more discoverable and have a higher level of engagement, what does that kind of content look like? And that's what I'm really interested in seeing. And seeing what you put out later this year as well. In a very short window, you've redirected spend and resources internally and built out custom outbound tools to sort of start targeting the right clients. That's a lot of decisions in a fast and short period of time. What's the core thinking behind how you're approaching the revenue side of CyberStreams right now? You did sort of touch on it just on the question before, but what was the material change that made you realize, like, hey, we actually need to start putting things in place now?
The idea that I want to grow, I want to grow quickly. And in order to do the type of growth that I want to do, and I want to grow not just as a business, but also enterprise value. I want to build an organization worth putting my name on before I'm done. And, I think in order to do that, and like I say, in order to not lose momentum every time that we are in front of an acquisition, or for that matter, even just a particularly large opportunity of any sort, to really get that arm delivering on its own. But beyond that, I would say that as I have started to dig into marketing, like one of the things that's that's interesting, you talked about, it is hard to close because it's a lot of times in our industry, it's a timing thing. They manage to the middle, right? There's a big push for kind of the standards and best practices within the industry, and so folks tend to get this advice, and MSPs aren't necessarily, or MSP owners who again usually are technical in some respect, aren't by default like the best folks at really interpreting that advice on the surface and then reflecting it through a lens of who they are and applying it to their business, how it makes sense, and kind of A/B testing and seeing what works and iterating. A lot of times they're just trying to rubber stamp, like, that was the advice I got, I'm just going to do that thing, which in your best case scenario makes you look and sound just like everybody else, right? And we're all selling the same tools and providing the same services. And so I think that, like, as we approach this year, one of the ways that I hope to change that dynamic of it's really just a waiting game and we all look and sound the same is by differentiating. And we're going to do that through nichifying, learning to speak the language of our niche very specifically. So we're not talking about our solutions, but we're talking about their problems. And further, I've got a little bit of, I've got some gravity right now with some really heavy hitting AI folks. I'm not really ready to announce where it's going, but we'll say we're trying to create an MSP that looks and feels different than anybody has ever experienced before. And if we can find some success at this, it's going to change the sales game, because I'll tell you what it made me think of last night, and it just hit me, is I'm like, this could be our Tesla. And what I mean by our Tesla is when Tesla came in and they wanted to make a car, they didn't just start making the Honda Civic. They started making the Roadster, right? They were the first electric supercar, and that's all they made. And so if we can be fast enough to do the things that I hope we can do, then all of a sudden we can be the only person who looks and feels like we do, and have a different approach to closing new business, because we can design a business that specifically serves those niches.
I think as well, compared to a lot of other MSP owners that I've met before, you're young, you're energetic, you've got the time, you've got the hunger to go and create something brand new that the market has not seen yet. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that looks like. But I love that you said niching down, because when it comes down to clarity, and typically speaking, when we look at typical marketing tactics, particularly with MSPs, is it's more of a reactive approach rather than a proactive approach. And that's what we found a lot with some of the past conversations we've had where we were just kind of like putting stuff out and just hoping for the best, right? But if you don't niche down, you don't have that messaging and that language that really resonates to their pain points, which is exactly what you said. And flipping it on its head is like, okay, we've done it this way for a decade. It's not really working for us. Let's try and reverse it completely overnight. So really excited to see what that looks like. You set a goal for this year, 25% of new clients sitting inside clearly defined ICP profiles. But how did you land on that number, and what does the ideal client actually look like for CyberStreams?
Yeah. So, I mean, that number, it seemed like a reasonable amount that we could generate if we started making our leads, looking at the leads we already get. And if we tuned it up so that our lead flow was more in line and more directed toward those folks. So 25% just seemed achievable, but it also seemed material.
Who is the ideal client profile for CyberStreams?
So we brought it down to two. A lot of folks say really go to one, but we're going from your standard kind of service everybody MSP, and we found that there's two particular types of clients who we work really well with, and we're prepared to dedicate the time and energy and be in their ecosystems to understand them and speak their language well. And I think that they're very similar, which is the tax advisory and accounting firms, and then particular legal segments, especially family law, business law. They tend to operate really similarly and have a lot in common with how they need to be serviced. So those are our two primary niches.
And a really good point here to note is, and don't, for the accountants who do listen to this, please don't come for me, but if you're able to understand their ecosystem and you can deliver an exceptional product to them or a service to them, they naturally have affiliations with other businesses, right? So then they can obviously refer you on. Whether there is some type of commission or a clip in between, who knows? Obviously, those are conversations for you and your clients, but that's a brilliant way of sort of looking at it. And that's a great way to test proof of concept. Is this a viable niche for us to really dive into? Sort of going to where you are at in terms of clients at the moment, and you want to get to 25% on top of that current number, before you can get there, what does the inside of the business actually need to look like outside of the sales and marketing piece? And what has to be in place before the growth is sustainable rather than just chaotic, I guess?
Right. You were talking about how the accounting firms, they have relationships with other businesses. I had considered private equity, which we don't actually have any private equity, but private equity is a niche for that same reason. Because if you can get the firm, then the firm likes you, and you can get or you can get any one of the businesses with the firm and then get to the firm through there. It just seemed like such a great thing. But yeah, same sort of, referral opportunity with the attorneys and with the accountants and tax advisors as well. So what does the inside need to look like, and what do we need to, what needs to be true for us to get there? So internally, we're going to have to improve our internal marketing. We're really going to have to be on message with ourselves so that we're not being inauthentic when we're out there speaking that message publicly. We are going to have to live and breathe these niches for that to permeate the organization and really deliver a quality product, let alone us learning to speak the message. And then at that point, we're going to need to hire at least one sales closer who can be focused on just participating in organizations maybe related to those niches, who can just focus on just being available to prospects as needed. And as I say that, not that this had never crossed my mind before, but it just becomes very real that, when we have that person, we're going to have a lot of dependence on us driving top of the funnel to make sure that they actually have folks to call so that we don't turn that person into an SDR.
A glorified SDR and a very expensive SDR, which I think in business in sort of 26 and even 25, right? And then it's funny, we did sort of a cold call round in the local markets, more so from a data collection standpoint. And it was very interesting because there's not many cold callers out there these days, let's be honest. So when we did our first cold call, as an example, the prospect at the end of the line was like, oh, this is odd. I haven't received a cold call in like years. And I'm like, maybe we now have to overcorrect again and go back to the methodology that's always worked for decades and decades, right? But getting to that person and getting people to pick up their phone is a whole separate conversation as well. So obviously when we look at top of funnel, there has to be a list for them just to rattle down and be like, okay, this is where, if we're going to focus on this industry and this profile, what do we do? Where do they hang out and how do we get there? Right. That's sort of evergreen question that businesses are always looking to answer. And then not only from the internal marketing perspective, but from the delivery aspect, is there things that you need to tighten up before you really look at scaling intentfully in 23, 26?
Well, a couple of things that we both intend to up-level but already do have some experience with is just becoming more in tune with the internal software, the line of business applications that these organizations use. So, you have practice management software for the attorneys. We've become familiar with one of the top ones, Clio. There's also Matter 365, which is it integrates deeply, as you can imagine, with Office 365. And then on the tax advisor side, like one of the most important things for them tends to be, they get very busy during a time of year and they need to make sure everything is working well at that time and that no projects are scheduled. And they also have requirements from the IRS to maintain, a written information security plan, or a WISP, right? And so having that, and we do have that familiarity with that as well, but making sure that our whole organization is familiar with kind of the software they use on a daily basis. So when they're calling in and getting help from the help desk or needing resources, IT engineering and architecture resources, that we're all familiar with that and designing accordingly.
Yep, I think that's a very sensible way to look at it. I think it's natural as well. One last question for you, Matt, before we wrap up today. But you spoke very clearly and confidently about wanting enough pipeline that you can start walking away from the wrong clients, which I would like to add, people don't talk about enough, but also stop holding on to the fear because you finally have options. That's as much of a mindset shift as a business one. For any founders who's not quite there yet or still nervous to lose anyone, what does it actually take to get to that place where you can afford to be a bit more selective with who you do business with?
Well, I'll tell you when I get there, but this is actually the second time I've heard this today. I was talking to somebody who just is closing crazy amounts of monthly revenue every month. And I'm just like peppering him with questions. I need to know what you're doing. And by the time I got done, I was like, your answers are both exciting and deeply frustrating because you're not doing anything magical. You're just doing the work that, exactly what they say to do, right? You're participating in the industry events, you're sending the right emails, you're sending the gifts, you're reaching out to the right folks, you're going through the motions of doing the right marketing stuff, and that's landing it. And he said, yeah, but you're going to have to start to exercise a new muscle, which is you're going to have to start to learn to turn away clients. And I want to listen to that and I want to live that out. And I feel like before I listen to that and live that out, there's maybe one intermediary step, which is another thing that I hear commonly, which is I design a solution for A or A and B, right? And that's the solution that I have, and we're going to deliver that solution. But if another business is knocking on our door and they like what we have to offer and they find value in it and they got a referral about how good we are and they just want to work with us, that maybe I'd be prepared to say yes, but just let them know I'm not designing my solution for you. I have a solution that works for my customers, and and if that solution will deliver value to you, then let's go. But otherwise, I can make a referral to maybe somebody who'd build something just for you.
Yeah. I like that approach because there is a lot of merit in the valuation of your work and your solution and not bending backwards to sort of fit someone else's. That's something that we also had to learn very early on as well. It's like you can't really keep doing bespoke builds because you'll get bogged down in the operations and delivery. You lose focus on sales pipeline, just like we spoke about before. And that's where that cycle begins. But I think when you start to systemize, have a really clear approach and who do we serve, who do we not serve, I think is also an important note, would really start to create systems, not only from the front end, but an internal and delivery perspective for you to really see significant growth for CyberStreams and for other founders who are listening to the podcast. But I really love this one. It's been very different. We've had other MSP owners on the podcast before, but you've offered a genuine point of difference between your acquisition stories, owning it from the commercial side, the ICP focus. There's a lot in here that founders in the service space are going to connect with. But links, if you were interested in working with Mat or wanting to keep tabs of what he's building this year, the relevant links will be posted down below in the show notes. But if you want to reach out to Mat directly, please head to cyberstreams.com, or you can alternatively reach out on the phone, which is not something people do very much anymore. 385-1806. And if you're sort of a founder ready to stop piecing together your sales process and actually build something that works, please do find me. But in the meantime, keep building meaningfully. Mat, thank you so much for your time and your feature on this episode.
Thanks, Jenny.